Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today I want to show you the best way how to access private repositories in Azure DevOps using ArgoCD. In my last video I showed you how we can use personal access tokens to access private repositories. This works. It's also easy to set up and to configure, but it comes with some downsides. Especially we have to manage the token and that the token is linked to my user. Today we're using Entra Workload ID. That's the managed identity feature of AKS using Azure. And with this, we can use the identity to access the repository. This means we don't have to manage any passwords, any token, and it just works. So the plan for today is, first we're going to create our AKS cluster. Then we're going to configure the Entra Workload ID. If you're interested in this topic, I have a separate video where I go into all the details, how it works, and I will link it in the description down below. After this, we're going to install the ArgoCD AKS extension. The reason why I'm not using ArgoCD itself is currently there's a bug, and this bug prevents us of using the workload ID. The current version as of recording of this video is 3.0.6. This feature has been introduced with version 3, so it's fairly new, and I've seen there's already a bug fix merged, but no new version has been released since then. By the time you watch the video, maybe it's already released, and then you can just use ArgoCD normally. After we've set this up, we're going to test everything with a private Azure DevOps repository. And if everything works as expected, we can access it without managing any passwords. If you're interested in the slides, in all the code examples and the snippets I showed today, you can scan the QR code. It will lead you to my GitHub repository, but I will also have the link in the description down below. Before we get started, I just want to go quickly into how Entra Workload ID works. And we can see here, there are quite some different components involved. It looks quite complicated the first time you see it. And also the text. For example, if you read the text over here, it says the kubelet projects a service account token to the workload at a configurable file path. If you have never used it, it sounds very confusing. But in the end, it's quite simple. So what we do is we are going to create a managed identity in Azure. Then we link this managed identity with a service account, and this service account will be used by our pod or our applications, in this case ArgoCD. And once ArgoCD wants to access our private repository, then ArgoCD uses the service account. The service account is linked to the managed identity, and then we give this managed identity the permissions in Azure DevOps. Since the managed identity has the permissions, ArgoCD can use them and then can access the private repository. I'm pretty sure if you have never used it, it still sounds complicated, but during this video, you will see it's quite easy to set up and it will also work, hopefully. So let's switch over to the terminal and get started. Here in the terminal, before we get started, let's define a couple variables. So that's going to be the resource group in which we're going to deploy everything, the location and the name for our AKS cluster. And then there are more variables. So that's going to be the name of the namespace where we're going to install ArgoCD, then the name of our managed identity, and also a name for the federated identity credentials. These federated identity credentials I needed to link the service account to the managed identity. So with the variables configured, let's now create a new resource group. Then inside this resource group, we are going to deploy our AKS cluster. So let me paste the code and then we're going to take a look what this code does. It's fairly simple. So we're going to deploy a new cluster in our resource group with the name we configured before, as well as the location. And then the last two parameters are the most interesting one. First, we enable the OIDC issue. This is necessary for the workload identity. And then we enable workload identity as well. This will allow us to give all our pods an identity, and this will allow us in the end to have ArgoCD use the identity to access the Azure DevOps repository. The deployment will take probably between 5 and 10 minutes. And once the deployment is finished, we're going to configure the workload identity and then install ArgoCD. If you're interested in the code, I will provide a link in the description down below, so you don't have to type anything. If you want to try it out yourself, you can just copy paste from there. And for now, I'm going to stop the video. Once the deployment is finished, we will continue. So we are back. The cluster has been created. Now we can continue. So let's clean up the terminal. Next, we're going to get the URL of our OIDC issuer. So you just use an AKS show and query the OIDC issuer. It should only take a second. Now we can print this to the console, and there you can see it's basically a URL with a mix of our tenant, subscription, and the name of our cluster. Actually, it's the location, not the name. And OIDC stands for OpenID Connect. That's a standard, and with this, our AKS cluster can get an access token. Before I said we don't have to manage any tokens, so don't worry. All is done behind the scenes, and AKS and Azure takes care of it. But AKS still needs an access token to authenticate, and this is done with this OIDC issuer. Next up, we're going to create a new identity. That's a managed identity. So we provide a name, then the same resource group and location as before. And this identity, we can later assign permissions, and we will use it to access the Azure DevOps repository. The identity has been created. Now let's also get the ID of the identity. So we just do an AC identity show. We provide the name, and then we query for the client ID. Then we're also going to paste the client ID to the terminal because we're going to need it for later. So I'm just going to copy it and put it in my notes on the side. And the last step for now is to download the credentials of our AKS cluster so we can access it later. Okay, now this is set up. Now let's switch over to our Azure DevOps and give this identity the permission needed. Actually, before I'm going to do this, let's print the name again and copy this name because we're going to use this name to give the identity permissions. I'm also going to copy this on the side into my notes. And now let's switch over to Azure DevOps. Here in Azure DevOps, we can now invite this managed identity the same way as we would invite a new user. So we click on the bottom left onto the organization settings. And here we click on the users also on the left. Then we click all the way on the right onto add users. Then we paste the name we copied before. And if you remember the ID, that's also the same ID we had before. So I know this is the managed identity I want to add. Then as the access level, I give it basic because it doesn't have a Visual Studio license and the stakeholder can't access the Git repositories. So I have to use basic. Then I can use it, add it already to a project. So in my case, this would be the YouTube project. But I have to admit, I'm not sure if it gives enough permissions. So let's leave it for now, but we're also going to check the permissions in a second. Lastly, we don't need to send out an email because there's nobody able to receive it. We're going to add it. On the top, we can see a task running that's already finished. And now our managed identity has been added. Now let's go to the project. So as I said, the project I'm using is called YouTube. And inside this project, we can go to the project settings on the bottom left. Here we can set the permissions. So on the left, we have the permission tab. If you click on this, you can see all the groups you already have. You can see the users. And the easiest way would be to either add it to the readers. Then this managed identity is only allowed to read. Or you can also add it to your team. So in this case, the YouTube team. And in the members, you can see there's only my user. But since I want to go with the least privileges, I only give it the reader permissions. So I'm going to click on the reader group, then on members, and here I add a member. Then again, I search for the user and I save this. Now my managed identity has the read access to my YouTube project. This means to every repository inside this project. For me, that's fine, but you could even go more granular and give it only permission for a specific repository. I only have one, so that's fine. And it's also to keep the demo simple for now. With this in place, now we can install the ArgoCD extension. Now let's switch over to Visual Studio and take a look at the configuration. I think I just said Visual Studio, I meant Visual Studio Code, but anyways, what editor you prefer. Here we have the main workload identity bicep file. And we are going to use this bicep file to deploy our AKS ArgoCD extension. There are only two things you have to update. The first one is the cluster name. So if you follow my demo, you don't have to change anything. And the second one is the workload identity client ID. That's the ID we printed before. That's the ID of our managed identity. So I'm just going to paste it in here. And everything else you can leave as it is. So by default, you're just as an admin allowed to do literally anything. If we scroll down a bit further, we can also see we install the Microsoft.ArgoCD extension with the version 0.0.7.preview. And the important parts are going to be this one. So we set the workload identity enable to true. And we also set the workload identity client ID to the managed identity client ID we have created before. I will also show you in the next steps how you can set up all of this without the AKS extension. So in case you are watching the video when the bug has been fixed, then you can just use ArgoCD. But for now, I'm just going to save this file and let's switch over to the terminal and deploy it. Back in the terminal, let's clean this up and paste the code. Since it's a biceps file, we're using biceps to deploy it. And all I have to do is provide the resource group name and the path to the file. If you haven't installed biceps, in my instructions, there will be a link where you can download it and install it. Should be fairly simple. Now let's execute this, and it will take around 10 minutes to install the ArgoCD extension. The extension will be installed in the ArgoCD namespace. So that's the same namespace we configured as a variable before. And once the deployment is finished, we will continue. The ArgoCD extension has been installed and now everything would work already. But I want to show you what you have to do if you're using the normal ArgoCD installation and how to configure it. So let's clean this up. Before I get started, I want to set the context to the namespace of ArgoCD, so I don't have to type it all the time. And now we can take a look at our pods and what labels and annotations they have. So first, let's do a kubectl get pods to get all the pods in the ArgoCD namespace. There you can see we have quite some, and we're looking for the ArgoCD repo server. So we're going to copy the name and we're going to do a kubectl describe of this pod. So it's kubectl describe pod and then the name of the ArgoCD repo server here. I just saw if typo, so now we have it, ArgoCD Repo Server. Here we get a wall of text, but if we scroll up all the way, we should see the labels somewhere. Where's it? Here it is. So we have the labels, and here we can see we have the Azure Workload Identity use set to true. So this tells ArgoCD to use the workload identity. So that's good. If you're using ArgoCD, then you have to set this label yourself. So you do a kubectl label, you name the pod, and then you copy this text here and set it to true. Actually, it would be nicer if you set it on the deployment, because if you set it on the pod will be deleted, then it won't be there anymore. But anyways, if you just want to try it out, it will work. So next up, we're going to take a look at the service account. So let's do a kubectl get service account. So this will give us all the service accounts we have in our namespace. And here we want to look at the ArgoCD Repo Server. So this one, and we're going to do a kubectl describe. So a kubectl describe, and we copy the name of the ArgoCD Repo Server. Actually, it's kubectl describe service account, ArgoCD Repo Server. And here we can see the labels and the annotation. And what we want to look at now is the annotation. So here we have the Azure Workload Identity client ID, and it is the same ID of our managed identity. So that's all great. If you don't have this, or if you're using ArgoCD without the extension, you have to do a kubectl annotate service account, then the name of the service account, and you provide this line here. Okay, so now we have installed ArgoCD. We have set up the workload identity. Now we just have to link the service account to the managed identity we created before. So let's clean up the terminal, and I'm going to paste the command, and then we take a look at it. So we're using the AC identity federated credential create. Then we just provide any name. Then we provide the name of our managed identity, the resource group, then also the URL of our OIDC issuer. And the last line is where we connect the service account with the managed identity. So here we can say it's a service account. It's in our ArgoCD namespace. And here we have the name. It's ArgoCD Repo Server. And with this, if ArgoCD requests an access token, then it uses the service account. This service account uses the linked managed identity. And since the managed identity has access to Azure DevOps, ArgoCD will have access. So let's create this. And with this, we are now finished setting up all the workload identity stuff. Now we only have to access the ArgoCD UI, or you can also use the ArgoCD CLI. I think the UI is easier to show in demos, and then we're going to test if we have the access. So let's clean this up. I also showed in my previous videos how you can set up the ArgoCD UI. So I'm just going to quickly over it. First, we're getting the admin password from the ArgoCD secret. Then we're going to print and decode base64 the secret. This means that's our admin password. And lastly, I do a port forwarding so I can access the service on port 8080, because by default, the service is only available from within the cluster. Now I can switch over to the browser and the localhost 8080, and I will be able to access the ArgoCD UI. Here in the browser, if you open localhost 8080 the first time, you will get an error message because we don't have a certificate installed. So we just proceed. Then on the right side, we enter the username as admin and the password we just copied from the console. Then we sign in, and now you can see the ArgoCD UI. Now we have to connect our private repository to ArgoCD, and then we can use it for deployments. So to do this, we have on the left side here the settings. Inside the settings, we have on top the repositories, and here you can click on Connect Repo. Now we want to connect our repository via HTTP. Then we select the type. Here we are going to use a Git repository. Then we provide the URL to our Azure DevOps repository. Actually, first we also provide a name. So I just say Azure DevOps demo. Then the project, that's the default one from ArgoCD. In a previous video, I showed you how to create your own project, but for now, just let's use the default one. Then here we provide now the URL. Now with the username and password, in my last video with the personal access token, we had to add a username and password here. But since we're using an identity, we don't need anything. So we can just leave this empty. But we have to scroll all the way down. And here we have use Azure Workload identity. And we have to enable this setting. Before I told you there's currently a bug in ArgoCD. And the bug is that even if you select the setting, the use Azure Workload identity, it is not added to the request or to the connection. And therefore it won't work. For now, that's everything we have to configure. So let's click on top to connect, and then we see if everything works. Here we can see the connection status is successful. And if you forgot some permissions, if you used a wrong ID or something, you will see here failure. It's not a great error message because it only tells you it didn't work and it doesn't tell you why it didn't work. So it can be a bit annoying to figure out what the problem is. But for now, everything works and now we can test it. So either we can click here on the three dots and say create application, or I can go on the left to applications and say on the top new app. So we're clicking there. Then we provide a name. Just let's say it's called demo YouTube. Then the project name, since we only have one, we select the default one again. Then I'm going to select auto create namespace and prune last. This is only needed because I want to create a new namespace with my deployment, and these two settings are needed for this. But to test the access in general, we don't have to configure anything. I just want to have a green deployment. Next up, the repository URL. Since we already configured this before, we can just select it from the dropdown. And now ArgoCD is connecting to the repository and it will check all the folders, all the files we have in there, and I can select them here in the path. So for now, I just select a simple one. I know in this one is a file where I create a new namespace. So that's very simple. Next up, we have the destination. Here we can configure on which AKS cluster we want to deploy our application. One of the great features of ArgoCD is that you can have ArgoCD on one cluster, but deploy on multiple clusters. But since I only have one, I select this one, and then you have to select the namespace where your ArgoCD is installed. And in my case, that's ArgoCD. So that's everything we have to configure. Now we can click on top on create. Now ArgoCD should see that there's a repository. The repository has files which we don't have running in our cluster. It will download them and should apply them. So let's click on our application. And here we can already see it is connected to the repository, and it also found that there's one file with the GitOps demo. And with this NS here, we can also see it's a namespace. It took a couple seconds, but now our files from the private Azure DevOps repository have been deployed. This brings us to the end of the video. So today we have seen how we can create a new cluster, install ArgoCD. I've been using the ArgoCD AKS extension because the current version of ArgoCD 3.0.6 has a bug that prevents us of using an Entra workload identity. But I also showed you how you can configure ArgoCD in case the bug gets fixed when you watch this video. There has been already a pull request accepted for the bug fix, so I expect it to be in the next version. That's probably 3.0.7, so it should be very soon. With the setup, I also showed you that we can use managed identities in Azure to access private repositories in Azure DevOps. And the great advantage is that we don't have to manage any tokens, any passwords. We just use the identity. This also means that we don't have a link between a user and the access to the repository. For example, if I leave the company, the deployment will still work. And I also don't have any secrets or passwords that will expire and suddenly break my deployment. In my next video, I'm going to show you how we can add more Azure features and leverage the Azure Entra identity to enable single sign-on for ArgoCD UI. And as you will see, it's very easy and straightforward and will help you to protect your UI. With this, I hope you liked the video. Let me know in the comments. Also let me know if you didn't like it, and I will see you next week with a new video.